I remember back in '97 when Final Fantasy VII was on the horizon. To say there was a lot of hype for that game is a understatement. In fact, it was the game that more or less made me decide to get a PlayStation 1 instead of a Nintendo 64 at the time. And back then, the internet wasn't a huge part of the hype machine. Most of the hype was done through other forms of media, like magazines. And the magazines were covered in pictures of Midgar, primarily. And before the game released, I was kind of excited for Midgar as a setting. The idea that instead of a overworld and multiple towns like we'd had in the previous Final Fantasy games, you'd instead just have this one huge city. Kind of a Blade Runner thing going on. And when the night finally came that the game was released, I was so excited and started to play. And yes, Midgar was a very interesting setting, while you're actually there for the first 4 to 6 hours of the game. After that, you find yourself on an overworld, where you go to various towns. And yeah, it looks a little fancier than it did back in the 8 and 16-bit days, but really it's not all that different from what came before. And back then, I was still excited to be playing a new Final Fantasy game, but it has been, over 2 decades since then. And as time has gone on, I've got more and more disappointed that we don't see more of Midgar. We see a small amount of the slums, 2 reactors, and Shinra headquarters. That's it. I would have liked to have known what's going on top of Midgar, in the nice part. And yes, much later in the game, you can actually go back to Midgar. But even then, you don't see that much more of the city, and it just seems like such a huge wasted opportunity. Something that really would have been unique and different from all the other games that came before it. Instead, they wasted that opportunity to give you more of the same, but this time with some 3D models and fancier looking backgrounds. But apparently, other people didn't mind this so much, as after all, this is the game that ended up finally popularizing the JRPG genre in the West. Still, I just can't help but wonder what could have been had we had a whole game, or at least the whole first disc, take place solely in Midgar. Then again, Final Fantasy VII Remake actually did have the whole game take place in Midgar. I still maintain it's a good idea, just that execution was not great. Please do subscribe, comment, like, and tell your friends.